of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Tuesday, October 10th, 2023. My name is Emma Vigeland in for Sam Seder, and this is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Jeff Schuhrke, labor historian and professor on the international solidarity shown to UAW strikers. And later in the show, Ettingermentum of the Ettingermentum newsletter will be with us to talk about the Republican Party's failed strategy of transphobia. Meanwhile, Palestinians in Gaza plead for help as the death toll from Israel's overnight bombing tops 800 and counting. 140 children included in that total. Hospitals and schools among the targets. Meanwhile, the UN expresses deep concern as Israel cuts off all food, water, and electricity to Gaza. The total of Americans killed now reaches 11, and the total from the Hamas attack is now 900. This comes as Israel has mobilized 300,000 reservists, a sign that a catastrophic ground invasion could be coming. The EU walked back its announcement that it was freezing developmental aid to Palestine after Ireland, Spain, and Luxembourg object. Back in North America, the Canadian Autoworkers Union launches a strikes, I should say, at several GM plants. Thousands of Walgreens workers walk off the job, demanding more staffing and better conditions. And TV and film writers officially approved their new 3-year contract with the studios. Kevin McCarthy still wants to be speaker. Good luck with that, buddy. Despite more than half of the Democratic Senate caucus calling on Bob Menendez to resign amid his corruption charges, he still wants to run for re-election. Did you know Will Hurd was running for president? I forgot. He's dropped out and endorsed Nikki Haley, which changes everything. Trump's civil fraud trial resumes, and the Trump Organization's ex-CFO Alan Weisselberg is taking the witness stand. And lastly, a state board in Oklahoma has officially approved the contract for the first publicly funded religious charter school in the U.S. That should not be legal. All this and more on today's Majority Report. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the show. I know that I said Sam would be with us from Vegas today, but I got a text from him last night saying, maybe not. Which means he might be having some fun.
Yeah, a little bit too much fun at the big, what do they got, the big giant globe with the LCD screens out there?
Oh, yeah. You know, I was actually seeing Vegas overhead watching Monday Night Football last night, and I was just reminded of how much money and how much money you can spend and how much fun you can have there. It really is. I've only gone to Vegas a few times, and it was all on work's dime, which makes it a lot more fun. I've never gone on my own dime. It's incredibly expensive. When you can get your meals expense and then gamble with, your own money, it makes it a little more...
Yeah, it helps you that it's fungible.
A little more enjoyable. Yeah. So I've yet to try to go there with, on my own dollar. But Sam is there at the Tort Conference. He said he may do a stream later today, but he will be with us tomorrow. Apologies for the confusion on that end. But on a more serious note, obviously we have to begin this show speaking about the escalation, the bombing campaign in Gaza. This latest outburst of violence, which is one of the worst that we've seen during the occupation. We knew that Netanyahu's government was going to respond in an incredibly violent way. The death toll from the Hamas attack within Israel, the attack on the music festival included, has risen to 900, 11 Americans among the dead at this point, and Gaza's death toll with this overnight bombing campaign is likely to, it's already near that. And by the time that you're listening to this, it likely will have surpassed that. The Israeli government has announced, as a part of this bombing campaign, they call it a complete siege of Gaza. This is
distinguish it from the major siege before that.
Right. As opposed the slow-moving violence that has been happening for decades. This is Israel's defense minister Gallant, who is one of the fascists in office there, announcing this siege. And he's not speaking in English here, but you can read the captions. And for the podcast audience, I will read it as well. It's a short clip, but he refers to the Israelis fighting, quote, human animals. I have ordered a complete siege on Gaza. No electricity, no food, no fuel, no water. Everything is closed. We are fighting human animals, and we will act accordingly. We act accordingly. So that's what he said there.
So they have the power to turn all that stuff off.
See, that's the problem. As Michael Brooks said, there is no symmetry in the relationship. The issue here is that one country, Israel, has the ability to shut off the water supply of another population, the electricity supply of another population, the food supply of another population. And that's exactly what we're talking about.
And not just here. On the terrorists.
No. This is the most densely populated place potentially on planet Earth. Orly Noy, when we interviewed her yesterday, likened Palestine to, if American audiences want to picture it, to Detroit, which has a population of around 600,000 people. By comparison, the number of Palestinians living in this very densely populated area is 2.4 million people. So there is no way to escape the bombing. There is no way to escape the violence, the bloodshed. They understand that innocent civilians are going to be killed here, entire families wiped out, children are half the population there, and that children will be among the dead, but that does not matter. This is CNN's Christiane Amanpour speaking with the Palestinian humanitarian aid worker Omar Garib, who is located in Gaza City here. Garib just gives some facts on the ground about what the siege on Gaza really will mean.
Can you first, Omar, start by telling us what you are witnessing right now? What has been happening all day today?
Yes, thank you for having me, Christian. A lot is happening. You are witnessing a compounded round of escalation. So 600 Palestinians have been killed across the Gaza Strip, and over 3,000 are wounded. And of course, the numbers are escalating by the minute. So Israel also declared a full closure of Gaza, which means no entry of food or fuel or medicine, really compromising the humanitarian situation even more. What we witnessed is very heavy airstrikes, hundreds of military airstrikes by Israel across the Gaza Strip, by land, air, and sea, including some of that destroyed essential water and sanitation infrastructure, which really raises the fears that Gaza will run out of drinkable water. And keep in mind that drinkable water is already scarce. So we're seeing a lot of targeting to residential buildings, houses, towers, and, this is also affecting the displacement. So, yeah, it's been a tough couple of days, honestly.
Omar, on Saturday, after this assault, Netanyahu told, quote, residents of Gaza to get out now because we will operate everywhere and with full force. And you may have heard some very, very tough comments about what's coming from our Israeli IDF spokesman and others on our program earlier. So my question to you is, where are civilians meant to go? Where are they going? Are they getting the warnings in time?
Actually, we're having the same question, honestly. If the Gaza Strip has no shelters, has no bunkers, and has no safe zones. So when people hear that, I'm not sure they know exactly where to go, considering that the Israeli attacks are cascading across the whole of the Gaza Strip. So I'm not sure how people will perceive this news and what to do with it. I don't deem it as really beneficial to people because, the Gaza Strip is a small coastal enclave. And as it's all compromised with the Israeli attacks, people have, no place to go besides the UNRWA schools.
It's propaganda.
So it doesn't make sense to me.
Right.
It's propaganda because we want to act like this is not attacking civilians because the whole point of the Stand With Israel stuff is that they attack civilians. But we're going to attack civilians just in mass, but act like we're doing it in a surgical way while we're calling them all animals and cutting all their power off.
Well, what is the definition of terrorism? It's purposefully attacking civilians and innocents, right? And that is the underlying accusation, rightfully so, against what Hamas did. But then why is that not applied to what Israel is doing right now, especially when the context of those two acts of violence are entirely different, when Hamas is in a religious militant group that is attempting, that has been, by the way, empowered by the Israelis, and I'll get to that in a second, reading from another piece in Haaretz, but where they are acting out. They committed this act within the context of broader Palestinian repression, apartheid, the Netanyahu government not even talking to the Palestinians who do not have clean water. 90% of Palestine doesn't have clean water in the best of circumstances before their entire infrastructure was being decimated here, versus the Israeli state doing this with the entire backing of the most powerful country in the world, most of the entire northern hemisphere of the world, saying, go ahead, do what you want, and we will support you. So the acts of violence have different contexts, and the party that has more power has more responsibility.
Yeah. Killing civilians in opposition to occupation and apartheid is terrorism. Killing civilians in response to those people is just defending yourself.
Against the animals, the subhuman animals. Yeah. Just to remind that that was one of the top officials in the Netanyahu government, which, by the way, they're smarting because this falls on them. Part of the reason that the southern border was not very secure from the Israel's perspective is because Netanyahu and that guy, was it Gallant and Ben-Gvir, have Netanyahu's basically outsourced it to them and said, go ahead, the occupation is your job, the pogroms is your job, essentially. And the troops that had previously been protecting that border and monitoring it were protecting the settlers as they were taking Palestinian land. They had been diverted to help with the settlements. That's part of the issue here. I wanted to read from this piece in Haaretz, as I did yesterday. This is I'm trying to find the name of the author here. Bradley, maybe you can find it as well. I retweeted it. But this is a piece that basically is scathing towards Netanyahu, and I think appropriately so. It's impossible to close your eyes to the reality. There's a clear connection between the corruption trial, the government's judicial overhaul, and the greatest failure since the Yom Kippur War of 1973, perhaps even since the establishment of the state. Admittedly, the intelligence agencies failed inconceivably at foreseeing the actual attack, but they warned Netanyahu time and again in recent months that Israel's enemies had identified a historic weakness, making the likelihood of war higher than it has been since the Second Lebanon War of 2006. Yet instead of quelling Justice Minister Yariv Levin, National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir and Finance Minister Benazir Smotrich, due to this danger, Netanyahu prioritized ensuring his personal survival and the integrity of his coalition at the price of capitulating to insane messianic racists. To this end, he turned his domestic rivals into enemies and systematically destroyed the connective tissue that, with great difficulty, has held Israel's society together. Effectively, Netanyahu's entire worldview collapsed over the course of a single day. He was convinced that he could make deals with corrupt Arab tyrants. This is referring to the efforts at normalization with Saudi Arabia, brokered by the Trump administration and continued by the Biden administration, which is horrific in terms of the Palestinian issue. But he was convinced that he could make deals with corrupt Arab tyrants while ignoring the cornerstone of the Arab-Jewish conflict, the Palestinians. His life's work was to turn the ship of state from the course steered by his predecessors, from Yitzhak Rabin to Ehud Olmert, and make the two-state solution impossible. En route to this goal, he found a partner in Hamas. And this is the quote. "Anyone who wants to thwart the establishment of a Palestinian state has to support bolstering Hamas and transferring money to Hamas," he told a meeting of his Likud party's Knesset members in March 2019. "This is part of our strategy to isolate the Palestinians in Gaza from the Palestinians in the West Bank."
If you don't like Hamas, take it up with Bibi.
The author's name of this piece is G.D. Weitz. All right, folks.
All the violence is lamentable, and it's all on the doorstep of the Israeli government, particularly Benjamin Netanyahu. And the solution is ceasefire. Not violence is the answer, which is what Bibi Netanyahu is saying right now. Yes, violence is the answer. Jake Auchincloss is saying, yeah, violence is the answer for a little bit, and then violence won't be the answer again. No, ceasefire, and then we need to move toward an end of this occupation and rights for people.
Yep. All right, guys, quick break, and when we come back, we'll be joined by Jeff Schuhrke. Oh, actually, not a quick break. Not a quick break. I'm so sorry. A word from two of our favorite sponsors. You've heard bedding and apparel brands say they're the softest and most comfortable, but do they promise that? At Cozy Earth, you get the softest, most luxurious feeling fabric guaranteed. That means if you don't love Cozy Earth's bamboo sheets, you have 100 days to get your money back. But they aren't worried about refunds because once you try Cozy Earth, you're hooked for life. And I am somebody who can speak to that. I have that Cozy Earth comforter. And for me, I'm a hot sleeper. I'm a bad sleeper. I don't know. I guess it comes with the job. But I really, really appreciate the breathability of what they offer. We have teamed up with Cozy Earth, and they are offering you up to 40% off at CozyEarth.com and enter Majority Report, one word, at checkout. Cozy Earth's luxury bedding is made with viscose from bamboo. Their items are temperature regulating, they only get softer with every wash, they're sensitive, skin friendly, and they're now available in 9 colors. Cozy Earth's mission is to help you find sanctuary in your daily life. Their luxury bedding and loungewear transforms lives by offering the softest, most luxurious, and responsibly sourced products in the world. They start with selecting only the best suppliers with an eye towards quality, responsible production, cutting-edge technology, and premium materials. And what is the Cozy Earth difference? The softest fabric guaranteed. Premium 100% viscose from bamboo fabric that feels like a cloud, the perfect sleeping temperature, temperature regulating, and moisture wicking fabric to keep you comfy year-round. The products are durable, they're machine washable. Their enhanced weave in the fabric is guaranteed not to pill even after washing and drying. And direct supply chains are used and ethical factories as well. Cozy Earth prides themselves on the ethical production of all of their products, and all Cozy Earth products can be returned or exchanged within 100 days and include an additional 10-year warranty against defects. I gotta say, I'm trying to get into this loungewear situation here, but I can speak to the quality of the comforter. It really does help me, particularly in the summer. Our audience can save up to 40% off. Save up to 40% at Cozy Earth today Go to CozyEarth.com and enter the promo code MajorityReport, one word, at checkout to save up to 40% off now. Try them for 100 nights. If you don't feel the difference, send them back for a full refund. That's CozyEarth.com, promo code MajorityReport. CozyEarth.com, promo code MajorityReport. And lastly, I could have used a little bit of foresight in purchasing this product I guess last week. I tried to keep it under wraps, but yeah, I was hungover because I didn't have Z-Biotics. Hate feeling miserable the day after drinks? Same. Luckily, a game-changing product called Z-Biotics is here to help. Z-Biotics' pre-alcohol probiotic is the world's first genetically engineered probiotic. It was invented by PhD scientists to tackle rough mornings after drinking. Here's how it works. When you drink, alcohol gets converted into a toxic byproduct in the gut. It's this byproduct, not dehydration, that's to blame for your rough next day. And I was not aware of that. You always hear drink water, and that stuff's good, but that doesn't help with this issue. Z-Biotics' pre-alcohol probiotic produces an enzyme to break this byproduct down. It's designed to work like your liver, but in your gut where you need it most. Just remember to drink Z-Biotics before drinking alcohol, drink responsibly, and get a good night's sleep to feel your best tomorrow. It's this little bottle. It's almost like a shot, but, obviously not. And you drink it before going out, having a few drinks, and you'll feel much better in the morning. Every time I have a Z-Biotics before drinking, it makes such a difference the next day. Even after drinks the night before, I know I'll be able to do this show. If I choose to have drinks on a weekday, which I'm trying to cut out, but sometimes it happens. If I want to go to the gym or something like that, this helps a ton. This Halloween, pair your candy and cocktails with Z-Biotics to avoid a spooky next morning. Go to zbiotics.com/majority to get 15% off your first order when you use majority at checkout. You can also sign up for a subscription using our code, so you can stay prepared no matter the time or occasion. Z-Biotics is backed with a 100% money-back guarantee, so if you're unsatisfied for any reason, they'll refund your money, no questions asked. Remember to head to zbiotics.com/majority and use the code majority at checkout for 15% off. That's zbiotics.com/majority. Use the code majority at checkout for 15% off. Thank you to Z-Biotics for sponsoring this episode. All right, folks, quick break, and when we come back, we will be joined by Jeff Schuhrke. We are back, and we are joined now by Jeff Schuhrke, labor historian, assistant professor at the Harry Van Arsdale Jr. School of Labor Studies at SUNY Empire State, who wrote a piece for In These Times entitled "This Fight is Global. Workers around the world are standing with striking U.S. auto workers." Jeff, thanks so much for coming on the show today.
Great to be here.
So what's it like to be a labor historian in these times? I mean, actually, in these times, I did not mean to do that, but it worked well. Like, it's got to be one of the most exciting moments in history, or to live through, I would say, in terms of just the hot labor summer into the cool labor fall or whatever, but I guess still hot. That didn't work very well, but you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, we're sort of in another Striketober, I guess. We've had Striketober before, but I guess we're back there again. Yeah, it's a really exciting moment for everyone in the labor movement, everyone adjacent to the labor movement in the United States. It's been, the labor movement's been I don't want to say dormant, but it's been kind of in decline over the last 40 years or so. And I don't want to overdo it and say like this is a complete turnaround, and but it has a lot of potential. This moment, the last few years, more and more workers out on strike. When last week the 75,000 Kaiser healthcare workers were on strike, combined with the auto workers and actors and various others. There was something like over 250,000 workers in the U.S. on strike at the same time, which hasn't happened since, I think, 1983. So it's definitely a really exciting, busy moment. Lots of new developments every day, every week. So.
Yeah, and I mean what we're on day 27 or 28, I believe, of the UAW strike, somewhere around that. I guess the rolling strike actions that the UAW is deploying. Your piece really talks about the importance of global solidarity as here in the United States. The big three automakers are sending out little media bites to outlets like CNBC and saying, hey, we might have to send our jobs to Mexico and things like that. But what you write about here is that auto workers in Mexico, the unions down there, they're expressing solidarity and showing it in many ways. What are you seeing from Mexican auto workers on this front?
Well, this is we were just talking about what an exciting moment this is for the U.S. labor movement. It's probably even more of an exciting moment the last few years for the Mexican labor movement, because for many decades, at least since the 1940s, Mexico has not really had a free and independent kind of labor movement. The major unions there were always closely tied to the government and closely tied to the employers. And contracts were signed without the union members even knowing about it, without their consent. Usually these kind of sweetheart backroom deals that sold out the members. Members had no way to vote for who the union leaders were, etc. But in 2019, Mexico's president, AMLO, signed into law a labor law reform that sort of democratized the unions in Mexico, that allows workers to be able to choose their own unions, to vote for who they want to have as their union representatives, and to be able to vote on contracts and to fight for real improvements in their wages and working conditions. And on top of that, the U.S.-Canada-Mexico agreement that was negotiated in 2019 has strong labor protection language in there that allows labor law violators in Mexico to effectively be sort of sanctioned, to have individual employers to lose their tariff privileges with the United States that could, if they violate labor rights. So a lot of Mexican workers in the last couple of years have been taking full advantage of this, and there's sort of a renaissance in the Mexican labor movement with this new independent democratic union movement that's been really strong in the auto industry in Mexico. Last year, a major GM assembly plant in Silao, Mexico, voted in one of these new independent unions, and they negotiated a double-digit wage increase. So these workers in Mexico totally understand what this struggle that the UAW is going through, what it's all about, and they see the connections there. The UAW has been sort of providing some support, moral support for this independent union movement in Mexico. So and when I also mentioned that when GM workers went on strike in the U.S. in 2019, some of these independent unions in Mexico were standing in solidarity by refusing to work overtime to kind of increase some of the pressure, the economic pain on on GM in that case. And there's been reports that some of the auto workers in Mexico are doing the same thing right now, refusing to work overtime. But more than that, they've been sending video messages of support shortly after the strike started. think this was on September 19th, a group of workers from a Goodyear tire factory in Mexico who just won their own independent union. They held a demonstration outside of GM's corporate offices in Mexico City, holding up signs in Spanish and English saying, we support the UAW strike, and recorded a video message that they posted to social media. So it's been very inspiring to see.
Absolutely. And I mean, it's not just the messages of solidarity. I would imagine that bolstering these unions in the wake of this agreement in 2019 and making unions more robust in Mexico makes it more difficult for these automakers to say, well, we're going to ship our jobs over there because, hey, labor's strong over there too. So that you might not be able to exploit workers in the same way that had been enabled really in the past with a lot of the free trade deals that we saw, including NAFTA.
Yeah, and that's kind of a key argument I try to make in the piece, that international labor solidarity, whether it's Mexico or Brazil or Europe or Asia, anywhere, it's not only a boost to morale for workers to say, oh, how it's really great that workers in another country are supporting us and standing with us. I mean, that is part of it, but it's also kind of strategic. One of the core demands of the UAW in this strike is to end tiers, the separate pay scales and benefits for workers doing the same work. They want to have equal pay for equal work, equal benefits for equal work. And some of the people who I interviewed for the article were telling me that there's kind of an international tier with Mexican auto workers doing the same work with the same skill levels as workers in the US, but being paid as little as $2.50 an hour. So if those workers can have strong militant unions that push for better conditions, higher wages, then it sort of sends the message to the big three that there's nowhere they can run. They can't just run off to Mexico, or they can't run off to some other country, because if labor is strong everywhere, that's what ends finally this race to the bottom that we've been seeing for the last 40 years at least.
You also write about how unions outside of Mexico and Venezuela and Italy and other places have also shown support for the UAW strike, if you don't mind talking a bit about that.
Yeah, and I talked to the UAW's International Affairs Department, and they were saying that they're kind of surprised in a way, because while they do have relationships with union federations and unions in auto worker unions or metal worker unions in a lot of different countries, a lot of the messages of support have been kind of surprising. They just been sort of coming out of nowhere, from Malaysia, from Thailand. There was a great message from French trade unionists that was a video message that was posted on social media. But probably the strongest union in the world that has been really showing a lot of solidarity with the UAW is the Brazilian Metal Workers Union, which represents auto workers in Brazil's southeast, the Sao Paulo region. This is the union where Brazil's president, Lula, got his start. He was originally an auto worker himself and a leader of the Metal Workers Union in Brazil in the 1970s. He led a series of militant strikes demanding wage increases against the economic policies of the dictatorship in Brazil at the time. And he ended up going to prison for a few years. And, now he's twice president of Brazil. And when the UAW strike, this current strike, began, that same week in New York, it was the UN General Assembly was meeting. And Lula was in town, and so was his Minister of Labor, Luis Merino, who is also a former auto worker and a member of the Metal Workers Union. And Merino, the labor minister, he met with some UAW members and leaders in New York to express Brazil's solidarity. And back in Brazil, several members, or thousands of members of the Metal Workers Union, have been holding rallies and big assemblies in solidarity with the UAW. So very strong. And again, inspiring, but also it sends the message to the auto companies that they can no longer pit workers against each other in different countries, because the working class is standing together in solidarity.
It really is awesome to see, and it's like the flip side of what we see with the anti-worker effects of certain globalization efforts, right? But this one is the globalization of solidarity through being able to see these images on social media and communicate in ways that hadn't been possible before. I mean, this morning I saw too that in Canada, the Autoworkers union there has launched a strike at several GM plants up in Canada, and they, I believe, if I remember reading this correctly, directly cite the UAW strike, or perhaps that was just the article drawing that comparison. But either way, you can see these actions as working in tandem with one another. What's your sense of how the UAW strike is inspiring other workers internationally to take similar actions and making their labor power known in different areas of the globe?
I think, first and foremost, the UAW's stand-up strike is inspiring workers in the U.S. In a really significant way, and that's what's really important here. Again, like I said, the U.S. labor movement has been sort of dormant. I hesitate to say that, but it's been in decline, and this is really inspiring a lot of union members and union leaders to make bold demands and to wage kind of aggressive but strategic types of strikes, as the UAW is doing. But internationally, I mean, yeah, Canada is a great example. That union is called Unifor, and it represents auto workers in Canada. They have also, at the same time the UAW has been in negotiations with the Big Three, Unifor has also been in its own negotiations with the Big Three. And just a couple of weeks ago, as the UAW strike already began, Unifor reached a deal with Ford, and they had a quick vote on it, and the members only narrowly vote. It was just like maybe 52% of members voted to approve it. It just barely squeaked through, because a lot of the members were saying, look at what the UAW is doing down in the US. We should be also, going on strike or fighting for more. And what's happened is GM is supposed to, theoretically follow the same pattern at Ford. So Unifor in Canada already has a deal with Ford, and GM was supposed to reach a similar kind of contract, but GM apparently is refusing to do that. And this is why Unifor members at GM, 4,300 of them, are out on strike as of this morning. And I think a lot of that was really inspired by the UAW. And in other countries, to be honest, I think the U.S. workers, including the UAW, unions in the U.S., including the UAW, could learn a thing or two from unions and labor movements in other countries, and how they often are organizing not only against really kind of exploitative employers, but also in environments where they don't really have a whole lot of labor rights. Or, in the Philippines right now, union activists are being murdered for their activism. So there's a lot of courage and bravery among unions in many other countries. And that's partly why we're seeing the solidarity. They think they're really happy to see a major industrial union in the US, sort of in the core of global capitalism, is taking this kind of militant stance. A lot of workers around the world are happy to see that, and that's partly why they're coming out in such strong support for the UAW strike.
Well, that's some good news, very much needed today. Good expression of the progress that hopefully we're making on this front. Jeff Schuhrke, a labor historian, assistant professor at SUNY Empire State. The piece is called "This Fight is Global. Workers Around the World Are Standing with Striking U.S. Auto Workers." Thanks so much for your time today, Jeff. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, guys, quick break. And when we come back, we'll be speaking to Ettingermentum about the electoral failure of transphobia. I'll be right back. We are back, and we are joined on the phone lines by Ettingermentum of the eponymous Ettingermentum newsletter. And you can find that over on Substack, Ettingermentum newsletter. Thanks so much for coming on. What should I just... Can I shorten it? Or
no, you can just call me Josh. Everybody just calls me Josh whenever I come on the shows like this.
Oh, okay. All right, Josh. Well, yeah. Josh of the Ettingermentum newsletter, you wrote this piece back in March that I've been wanting to have you on to discuss for a while now, the modern electoral history of transphobia. Thanks so much for coming on. I cite it all of the time when I hear from liberals about how being strong on trans issues, protecting trans people, is somehow a liability at the ballot box.
Yeah, that's like, it was really strange doing the research with this and even like kind of thinking about it beforehand, because that was such a strong myth. People would just say out of hand, like, oh, all these woke policies, like bathrooms, like that's what's killing Democrats. But like, if you just looked at a very cursory history of the times that this has been a major electoral issue, it's been terrible for Republicans. It's not just in blue states. Like my approach for it is I went from like 2015 basically to the present day, starting in North Carolina and to the 2022 midterms. And I wanted to give kind of a balanced kind of like story, like, oh, this is where it's worked, this is where it hasn't. But when I was doing research, I couldn't find a single example of where it was successful. All of the times where they've attempted these, like making transphobia a major issue of political campaigns, it has basically ended in failure. And I thought that, like, just putting that like in a timeline could be an effective way of kind of definitively showing that this is not really the issue people think it is politically.
Well, let's go through that timeline then, and talk a bit about those early losses and when the issue of trans people started cropping up within the right-wing legislative movement. North Carolina's bathroom bill is the time, I would say, that the right planted their flag on this issue and tried to make it a thing. And this was a bit of a ramp-up period because this bathroom bill at the time, I remember, it was condemned and CEOs started to say, we're not going to do business in North Carolina and things like that, which sounds probably a bit foreign to people now, given how widely spread these state legislature-driven trans-affirming care bills and drag bans, how I would say widespread they are. But just take us back to that time period in North Carolina and the context of how that started.
Yeah, so, well, like they've been pushing bathroom bills specifically starting around the early, like, 2010s and 2013. 2013. It was this organization called the Alliance Defending Freedom, which is a very like influential Christian conservative and like classified as a hate group by I think the Southern Poverty Law Center, and they created model legislation for these bathroom bills, and they hadn't actually been passed anywhere. But what was going on in North Carolina is that Republicans there had tremendous levels of legislative control. They had supermajorities, they had the governorship. And they were considered by national movement conservatives as a laboratory state to pass these sorts of like the most far right policies to see basically what they would do to test them out. There were other states like this, like Wisconsin with anti-labor legislation and Kansas with tax cut legislation were also seen as laboratories. But North Carolina was sort of the electoral and social issues laboratory for them. It was one of the first places they passed voter ID laws. So you can't separate this push from the other like parts of the right-wing project. And the first move was made by the Charlotte City Council, basically. You can like, this is all like inside of the story. I'm just kind of looking back at it, where they passed a bill that would like kind of establish prohibiting discrimination on gender identity in their public accommodations. And the government there in North Carolina freaked out about this. They passed a bill that took total local control out of how like local municipalities could handle this. And they also outlawed like changes in the minimum wage. It was just a kind of a power grab. And like you said, it created a huge backlash. It was considered a very new thing. It was a totally new issue. Nobody understood why like they were going so hard on it. And with businesses, they understood it basically as, well, the state is mandating discrimination. We can't really advertise ourselves as being in the state if we're abiding by these policies. And it cost the state $4 billion. And that's a low estimate. It was a massive economic hit. And that was how the first kind of battle of this was colored, where it was seen as sort of an economic issue. And but even that kind of clouds what the right was trying to do here, where their mindset was, they'll try to make this an economic issue, but we're so on the public opinion, we're so right on that we're just going to win either way. And that didn't work. And they lost the North Carolina governorship to, admittedly, a very strong and popular candidate, Roy Cooper, who campaigned largely on this issue, even as Trump won the state. So there was 50,000 to maybe 100,000 Trump voters in North Carolina who voted for a Democrat in that election over this issue. So
this was 2016, right, Josh? I mean,
so 2016.
Democrats did not do well almost, anywhere.
No.
Except for in this situation and the explicit context of, Roy Cooper running, rejecting the transphobia versus his opponent, McCrory.
Yeah, and this is a really amazing fact. McCrory was the sole incumbent Republican in the entire country to lose in a state that Trump won.
Wow.
There was not a single other Republican running in a Trump state that lost in 2016 besides him.
And I mean, so that you can see, and you can't draw a causal connection there, obviously, but one of the data points is that voters were not moved enough by transphobia to re-elect McCrory, they instead...
They were moved in the other direction.
Yeah.
And McCrory was very popular. He won by 12 points in his first election. He won the city of Charlotte. He was considered a moderate, pro-business Republican. He was the mayor of Charlotte, actually, which is kind of unimaginable now. And his reputation got destroyed by this, and it's caused him to lose a race he absolutely should have won. Incumbent governors rarely lose. They especially don't lose when the president is carrying their state in a presidential year. We haven't really seen a result like it since. And Cooper has remained very popular. He won re-election even as Trump won the state in 2020. So it's not just he's a strong candidate, but he never could have won if it weren't for them making that stance. And that was how the issue got introduced really to the country and to the Republican Party. And it really clouded their perceptions of it for the next couple of years during Trump's tenure.
Yeah, and you can, okay, so then that's how this issue was introduced. It was a failure for at least the governor, the election for the governorship in North Carolina in terms of the Republicans' point of view here. But people then will say, okay, this was before there really was a national narrative about trans people. Trump had just gotten elected. They were beginning to talk about trans people in a derogatory manner, but there was not the just tidal wave of transphobia that we saw in 2022. Let's talk, though, about that period in the early Trump administration when there were also losses with transphobia being on the ballot.
Yeah, there was some stuff here with Roy Moore in Alabama and the 2017 gubernatorial races in New Jersey and Virginia. But the one that I really think is important here is because this was explicitly recognized as a turning point by the anti-trans PACs, like this one group I found everywhere, the American Principles Project, which is a really funny group. They were founded to advocate for a return to the gold standard, and they really got obsessed with trans stuff about 5 years ago. But in 2019 there was another governor's race, in this time in Kentucky, where a Republican governor there, Matt Bevin, was incredibly unpopular. He had he had major clashes with the teachers in his state. It's traditionally more Democratic down ballot, so he was considered vulnerable. The Democrats there nominated the sitting attorney general, this Andy Beshear, who is the son of a very popular former governor of the state. So he was a strong candidate, sort of similarly to Cooper. And it was considered to be a race Republicans had a real shot of losing, even though it was in Kentucky, because the incumbent was just that unpopular. And what they did here, and you can read articles from before the race, they explicitly used this election as a place to test out a new kind of transphobia as a wedge issue. And it's not just conjecture here. The groups here were explicitly saying, yes, The bathroom stuff didn't work. People aren't moved by that. They think we're weird for even bringing it up. But when we talk about boys and girls sports, that is our new angle. We're going to run these ads and do this, and we have proof that it changes things. So they explicitly laid down the gauntlet in this race in Kentucky, and this was a race Republicans were leading in the polls in by the time of the election, and they said this was going to change the race by 4 to 7 points, which is a massive swing.
Right.
Like Biden won in 2020 by only 4 points. If like that could have swung the entire election to Trump if this was really that effective, and it failed. Bevin lost as an incumbent. Beshear beat him, and this like campaign, like first it failed in North Carolina, which it's going to say, granted, that's a relatively moderate purple state, but Kentucky is like one of the reddest states in the country.
Voted for Trump by 30 points. Voted for Trump by 30 points.
If there's any place on the planet where right-wing wedge issues should be effective, it would be there. And like I kind of am planning on following this up because Beshear looks he's on the ballot next month because Kentucky has election years, the year before presidential races. And they're doing the same exact strategy again. And a poll recently showed Beshear up by 16 points. So it didn't work then, and it's not working now. And that was a really weird moment for these kinds of groups because they explicitly laid down this as their test case, and it totally just did not work.
Yeah, and I mean,
and it wasn't even a business angle here. It was just purely culture.
Exactly, and then the national narrative is beginning to ramp up. People are becoming more aware of trans people in general. The other examples you cite in this period, the Roy Moore loss in Alabama, but I think you can't draw more conclusion from that. I would say, given the fact that he was accused credibly of basically being a pedophile, and then
it didn't save it from that. The transphobia didn't save the pedophilia accusations.
Yes, right, and then in New Jersey and Virginia there were two governorship losses for Republicans. A Democrat was elected in New Jersey, Phil Murphy, and then in Virginia as well. But those were right, but those their opponents kind of shied away from transphobia, so it's a data point, but it's not necessarily, I would say, the example that wins the day here, which is the Andy Beshear case. And then we get to 2020 and 2022, and I would say where your piece go ahead.
If you don't mind, if I could go back to the 2017 races. One thing that I found that was very interesting in those is those were races where Republicans did moderate on the issue a little more, and you could say they lost both races by pretty big margins. It didn't make an impact, but they actually won between the two states, 3 congressional districts that voted for Democrats in 2018. So the moderation of those issues you could have said, helped them a little bit. And I calculated it that like if those districts had voted for Republicans the next year, they could have very well won the House in 2020. But they didn't because there were 3 incumbents in all of those across those 3 states that all won their re-elections, I believe.
Yeah, I mean it makes sense. And then just to jump forward here, because I do want to kind of get your general thoughts on the topic after we lay out all of these examples. 2022 is the year where all the transphobes lost. But I guess we can start with 2020 and then move to more current times.
Yeah. Well, 2020 was a very awkward year for them because they had failed on basically everything. And Trump was doing this kind of interesting strategy where he was trying to appeal to Clinton voters, which actually to an extent did work. If you look at states like Florida, he did increase his numbers with some traditionally Democratic demographics, but he lost enough support among white voters that he lost the election. I think there's kind of a funny statistic that the only group in the entire country that voted for Trump by less or swung against him in terms of vote share in 2020 was white men, which is like, it really goes against a lot of liberal narratives about how that election turned out and is something I try to point out a lot. But part of what they were doing with that is that they tried to advertise Trump as pro-gay. They sold Pride MAGA stuff. They had like rainbow MAGA hats. They called him the most pro-gay president in history. They had his gay national security advisor give a speech at the RNC. They had these rallies called Trump Pride, where it was basically just anti-immigrant stuff, saying the immigrants hated gay people. So there wasn't much of an interest in this kind of culture warring during that election. and that kind of gave transphobes a bit of a time to regroup, and it allowed them to separate themselves from both they did actions. There was Schilling spent a ton of money and sent a ton of like very tawdry smears against Biden, saying that he was endorsing sex changes on 8-year-olds. But it was a limited role. The campaign didn't really embrace him. But this allowed them to really be sort of have their hands clean from that disaster of losing that race, losing the Senate and the House and January 6th. So they get sort of a moment where there's this big power vacuum and they can come in as sort of outsiders with a vision for the party where they kind of affirm Trumpism in their own way. And what's concerning about this is that if you read what they wrote here, they constantly cited center-right or right-wing or liberal Democrats who were just bringing up transphobia as an issue they were losing on with no evidence. Like people like James Carville and David Shore, even elected officials like Abigail Spanberger, they used this as a shorthand, and they were constantly quoted by the groups like the APP to prove that this was somehow a losing issue for Democrats. And that was massively influential within the Republican Party in this period because they felt like they had no path forward. And that allows them to kind of create this modus operandi and a point of existence and a whole national program around this proven to fail strategy that is being propped up by these people who really don't know what the hell they're saying on the Democratic side and are just
they're going from gut. I mean, the big problem that I have with this, with the way that you hear the electoral argument around shying away from transphobia framed, is that there's no empirical data to back it up. It's just going from a general kind of ickiness that certain people who are more conservative Democrats feel when the issue is brought up, as opposed to the timeline that you lay out here. I'm at the end of your piece. You just go through it. I'm scrolling now. Tudor Dixon defeated Gretchen Whitmer. Tony Evers.
No, she was. It was the other way around.
Oh, sorry. Gretchen Whitmer defeated Tudor Dixon. My apologies. Evers defeated Michaels or however you said his last name.
Some random guy.
Right. Shapiro won in Pennsylvania against Mastriano. John Fetterman defeated Oz. Cortez Masto won in Nevada. Carrie Lake lost to Katie Hobbs. Mark Kelly defeated Blake Masters. Tim Walz defeated Jensen in Minnesota. Maggie Hassan defeated Bolduc, who was a very far-right Republican. Warnock defeated Walker.
He was the Bolduc was the commander of AFRICOM, which I always thought was very funny.
Yeah.
It was a bit of a step down from his previous work, going from commanding the U.S. Army and an entire continent to talking about litter boxes.
Yeah,
that was always a fun sideshow.
Right. He was one of the the Republicans that the Democrats ran ads for in the primary process because he was
that worked. Everybody was hating on that, but it worked.
Oh, it worked. I advocated for it at the time. The Democrats absolutely should push the more extreme Republicans to the general election when they can, because to be honest, as you that's just politics. You want to make your opponent more marginal and associate them with things like January 6th and with things like transphobia. So I guess now we're in the modern era. Go ahead.
That is not an abstract thing. I think some people have calculated there are nearly 10 Senate seats Democrats have won since 2018 because of candidate quality. They control. They have the majority now because they have pushed these right-wing extremist people ahead of the moderate. They don't need much help. They are not moderate, nominated, obviously. But that strategy has been massively successful. If they tried to just have kind of a gentleman's agreement with the moderates and let them win their primaries, they would probably not hold the Senate right now, and they couldn't get any of the judges through.
Right. But so the overall point here is that that was a resounding defeat for transphobia.
Mm-hmm.
Resounding.
Yeah, historically terrible election, especially given the context. There's no precedent for it.
So, I mean, let's just talk about this then from the big picture now that we've laid all of this out here. There's a difference, I would say, between issues and how they poll, because in a vacuum you can ask somebody, hey, do you think that a trans girl should participate in this track meet or whatever? And you might not get the numbers that you want as somebody who wants to advocate for trans rights, but that doesn't mean that they're going to vote based on that response. And that's the disconnect.
That is something that that is something that people who call themselves like popularists and say that they're all these electoral experts, this is like so basic that it baffles me every time. Issue polling matters, but what matters a lot more is issue salience. If people are going to actually vote on an issue when they go to the polls. And the question of like some like teenager competing in a sport that most people don't care about, like somebody who like most people like still I don't know if they even met a trans person. It's not an issue they have any personal investment in. That is not like considered relevant to their daily lives. So when Republicans talk about it all the time, it makes them look out of touch and like opportunistic. And the second thing is that this issue is very, very easily connected to a larger question of acceptance of LGBT people, which is a settled question. People are broadly very in favor of that. So you don't need to campaign on this when like Republicans try to bring up the boys and girls sports things, which may or may not poll well. You don't need to actually fight on that issue. You can just say, why do you hate gay people? Why do you hate LGBT people? I'm tolerant. I support everybody. You're a bigot. That works. People connect it to this larger question because they're not dumb enough to think that it's just like co-signed to this one issue. They see what the purpose of these like why these people are bringing it up. Like voters are generally kind of stupid, but they're not like completely like robotic, and they can make these connections and they can see what Republicans are trying to do here.
Yeah, and I would say, too, the people that are going to be motivated to vote based on transphobia are already evangelical right-wingers who are voting for Republicans anyway.
Yeah, it doesn't expand the base.
Yeah.
And the thing is that it makes them look like religious lunatics to the secular northern swing voters who are crucial to any Republican national victory, who they've been doing terribly with since Dobbs. So it only like reinforces the ways in which those kinds of very influential like parts of the electorate already dislike Republicans.
Yes. And on the flip side, is there any evidence to show that activists on the left who are advocating for trans women in sports and trans rights to make sure that trans people have every opportunity to participate in the joys of life based on their gender identity, is there any evidence that that is affecting people at the voting booth in terms of turning them off from the left or the Democratic Party?
It's tough because Democrats have not made this a major part of their campaigns like Republicans have. And when they have, it's just been a larger question of, I'm the tolerant candidate, I support everybody, I love everyone. And that appeals to people. It's a major part of the Democratic appeal. You can very easily fold these specific issues into larger questions where the left holds a massive advantage. People kind of need to understand politics is more of a fluid sort of process than just an ideological war of one thing versus the other, like it's a YouTube debate channel. No offense to any YouTube debate channels.
Yeah, well, I mean, we've done debates on this show before, but I understand the limits of what that can provide. Well, it's mostly fun for us.
That's not how electoral politics is, and people kind of fail to make that distinction sometimes. I don't think you guys do, obviously.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that. But I mean, I'm frustrated, though, by the vibes argument about transphobia and the fact that it's not backed up by any of the examples that you so thoughtfully write about in your piece. And what do you think really motivates that? Like, why do you have...
Yeah. Well, you can only come to two conclusions for it. It's people are either like closeted transphobes who are disingenuously pushing this argument because they have an agenda to hurt trans people, or they're too stupid and lazy to ever be taken seriously on anything. Because if you're a major public figure who writes about this stuff and is influential in the way that a lot of these people are, you aren't even doing the basic due diligence to see if like your gut feeling, which in a lot of cases is motivated just by these people being transphobic. Like Michael Bloomberg, when he was running for president, just said blatantly transphobic stuff when trying to say this was an electoral liability. You're not dealing with any of this seriously. It's just a level of laziness that is hard for me to even really comprehend. Like, you presumably care about winning, right? You should probably like look to see if what you're saying actually matches with what's happening. Like even like you can go down to the lowest possible level, totally remove any sense of morality, and they still fail even by their own standards, just out of sheer neglect.
Absolutely. Well, Josh, Ettingermentum, really appreciate your time today. Any last words before we let you go?
No, it's nothing in particular. This is just one thing. This is a free article in my newsletter. I have a lot of other stuff that I've written recently about electoral politics and history and American political history that you guys can check out. Like my latest piece is about speaker elections, like kind of going over why McCarthy lost that race and like kind of what comes next. That kind of goes like a lot of stuff about the failure kind of conservatism generally. But if you're interested in any of that, that's on my site. So it was good being on.
Yeah, Ettingermentum.news. People can go and subscribe there. We'll put a link to that in the description. Really appreciate your time today.
All right, thank you.
Thanks so much. All right, folks, with that, we are going to wrap up the first hour of this program, head into the fun half where we will take your calls, we will read your IMs, we will do some clips. Again, Sam will be back tomorrow. He might do a stream on the channel later today. We shall see. That's up in the air. But Matt, what's happening on Left Reckoning tonight?
Yeah, Left Reckoning tonight. We have Ben Burgess and I believe a Palestinian guest to talk about everything going on. So check that out.
Yes.
Patreon.com/Left Reckoning.
And on ESVN, we're doing our episode today because Bradley is back. Mega episode, week 5 in the NFL. Is Zach Wilson good? ? The age-old question. And is Bill Belichick completely washed? Among other things, youtube.com/ESVN show at 4 p.m. today. And then maybe we'll talk a little bit about the baseball. But for me, it's just, I'm going to have to outsource that to Bradley. The number is 646-257-3920. See you in the fun half.
You are in for it.
All right, folks, 646-257-3920. See you in the fun half.
Are you ready?
Who sent us this?
Anarchy. Alpha males are back. Boy is back, and the alpha males are back.
Just as delicious as you could imagine.
The alpha males are back. Boy is back, and the alpha males are back.
Just wanna degrade the white man.
Alpha males are back.
I take all of it in my throat.
Alpha males are back.
Snowflake says what?
The alpha males are back.
You are a madman.
And the alpha males are back.
Oh no, Sam Seder! What a fucking nightmare!
Bring back DJ Danner.
Yeah, or a couple of them. Just put them in rotation.
DJ Danner.
Well, the problem with